gonna I'm not huge into comics. I just recently started reading comics, so I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on like everything that's going into it or about eternity and stuff. But the fact that the daughter came back and we saw the reflection as eternity, is it going to come into play? Like, is this actually love? Is it like a mix of love and eternity, or like what do you think is going to happen with that? Do you think we're going to get more information on that, or are they just going to leave us in the cold and it's just going to be love from here on out?
That image reminded me of What If, right? Like, didn't you get that vibe?
Oh my gosh,
of, like,
yes.
It looked kind of like the Watcher. And so I don't know. That's what I thought of. And I do think that if they showed us that, I feel like they show us everything for a reason. Mm-hmm. So I do feel like this will come into play.
And now she has those purple powers too.
So Eternity's sitting there. Eternity's sitting there in the center of the universe, waiting to grant somebody's wish.
And it plays very similar to the Soul Stone realm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So why is Eternity granted? Why does Eternity want to grant this wish? And then does love become Eternity's avatar so that it can escape that realm? What is Eternity's motivation here? I don't know if they thought about it, but I was thinking about that.
And at the end, I know this is just because there has to be a story, but Gore could have so easily just wished Jane Foster better, because Thor was like, this is my love, this is what keeps me going. Like, he didn't have to bring his daughter, who was going to have
only gets one request.
Yeah.
But of course, if Thor has the key to eternity, why wouldn't Thor go back and do it?
True.
Do you only get does Eternity only grant one wish per universe, per timeline?
That seems a little selfish, Eternity.
I don't know how they're going to write it that way, but
right.
We're getting huge concepts in the MCU with these large beings. I mean, even the fact that, and what was the place called? The Palace of Omniscience or something like that.
Omnipotence City.
Omnipotence City. Like, just first of all, I love the fact that there was a Easter egg to a Pixar short, or the Disney short with Bao, the dumpling. Like, that was cute. But like, to have like the Celestials like kind of like sitting outside of the palace, like looking in through the window, like all of this has a bigger inner working with. And
what's interesting, Tony, you're talking about like the big themes. So and maybe this is a different a chat for us to do a different time, but to talk theologically just for a second, suffering, the whole issue that people have with God or gods usually centers around suffering. How can a god or gods allow suffering? And so usually what it is there's a conflict between what people want God to be and what the gods are. And so, and I'll do a TikTok video on this. It'll be very short. But basically, people want God to be one of three things: all loving, all knowing, and all powerful. And if God is those three things, then suffering shouldn't happen. If God's all loving, all knowing, and all powerful. So the way that theologians fix that is God can only be two out of those three things at any given time. So what they play with in Love and Thunder is the idea of omnipotence and all loving. They don't really play with the idea of all knowing, but they do play with this tension between power and love. And what are gods? And that's why it's called Omnipotence City. So what are gods with power, but without love and compassion? Right? So we have the power, but we're not compassionate, therefore suffering can happen. And so it's only with love that suffering can be alleviated and the gods can use their power. And so, and all knowing, if God's not all knowing, then God doesn't know the results of interference. And so therefore God allows for bad things to happen because God doesn't know that interfering will necessarily make it better. But Thor uses his power and love to interfere to hopefully help. And so that's kind of how suffering works. And that's Taika Waititi's thesis in the movie ultimately is that you need love and thunder.
Yeah,
You
and
need power with love.
yeah. I think we've also gotten with the Thor movies, we've gotten this concept that Thors are just I'm sorry, gods are a higher level beings within the Marvel universe. And I always think it's important to remember that when we're talking about this, we're talking about fiction. People that get offended by certain like concepts that maybe that challenge your religious beliefs, it's fiction. If fiction makes you uneasy, then you need to go back and work out your own faith. But at the same time, we had Loki. Loki's a god, and Loki's a terrible person, like for the most part, unless you love him, and then we love him, and he's wonderful. But like Loki does bad stuff, and Loki doesn't know. He's not omniscient. He's obviously not all powerful. He's got limitations. He doesn't make good decisions. And then you even had like the first god that Gore kills. This god knew nothing about what was the suffering of his people. In fact, he took pleasure out of the suffering of his people and just said, there'll be more of them. Why would I care about you? I'm only kidding. And like, he didn't even know it was his follower until he started talking. He's like, oh, he's one of mine. And, there was that concept of like that being was not being a self-declared god of these people that had maybe at some time had helped out the people or had established these people and did not care for them. Zeus has this concept of they don't ask for us for anything. They don't ask for the rain. They don't ask for, for crops. They, and we need to reinstill instill fear in them. There is this selfishness about it. And I find it interesting because then you have Thor. Thor is an Asgardian. He's considered the god of thunder. But at the same time, he's the champion for his people. He doesn't look at himself as a king. He doesn't look at himself as a god. In fact, Thor very rarely ever refers to himself as a god. He just knows that he works with those people. And he knows nothing of them. In fact, he was excited. He looked at Zeus as this hero of his until he realized that he was a better god than Zeus ever was. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting concept. Is like you have these higher level beings that interfere, and there's this conflict now. The superheroes are taking the place of the gods. And it's always funny because even if you look at like DC Comics and stuff like that, there was always this time where the heroes have always been called the new gods. And that's what we have is these new Terran gods that are saving the day and people are looking up to. It makes perfect sense what that end credit scene was leading to.
Did you catch that Jesus was in Omnipotent City?
No.
I didn't know.
I didn't see that either.
The carpenter god.
Oh.
He's going to the different gods.
I'm gonna
and he says,
now I have to go back.
He says, there's the carpenter god, the god of carpentry.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't notice that. I tried to look for some of the gods from
They
Moon
don't
Knight.
show him. They don't show him. They only reference him.
Okay.
And they reference
I did
him.
not catch that.
They reference him by referring to him as the god of carpentry.
So we're skirting around that scene. We might as well go ahead and talk. We might as well get to the bottom of the most important part of that scene.
The bottom? No, just kidding.
Well,
it is the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, so we know that Zeus puts a little bit too much power on Thor and rips his clothes off, and we saw some of the females and the male guards like swooning for him. And of course that was a funny scene. But did you guys notice those tattoos?
Yeah, I know. I actually took a video of it of this scene. Of this scene right here because I for evidence of Thor's butt. No, but I wanted to see the tattoos. I took a video of it and like I saw like a Loki. I didn't see all of them, but yeah, he had a lot more tattoos than when we last saw him.
So there's a scroll on the side on his back, and it has a list of names, and it says Mother, Father, Loki with a question mark. And then it says Tony and Natasha.
Oh.
Yeah.
Emotional damage.
I was dying when I saw the question mark. I saw someone post it on Twitter and I could not, I posted a TikTok, you probably saw it, I could not stop laughing. Because that's such a Thor thing to do.
But he put so much tattoos on him for Loki as himself. Like the fact that like there's no question he loves he loves Loki. He's always loved Loki, and
Mhm.
he's always had that. Even at the end of the first Thor movie, he's trying to save Loki from crawling off the Bifrost. You know, he's talking to Loki when they're going to fight the Dark Elves about, you know, how he wanted to be with them. Like he I can't trust you, but you know, I love you. And even in Avengers, he tries to give him a chance. You know, we
Mhm.
can fix this, brother. You know, there's always this out of love. And even when Fury had insinuated about torturing Loki, Thor didn't like it.
Mhm.
He always went to Loki's defense. But and of course Ragnarok was probably the most heartfelt between the two of them, which if the fact that we did not get a hug.
Yeah. Did you guys notice though? If you notice, Thor has a piece of Loki's hair braided into his.
What?
Yeah. He had it in Ragnarok too, but he has it again in this movie. If you look, it's a piece of Loki's hair.
Oh, I will definitely have to go relook.
It
I just
kills
looked
me every time.
at the tattoos, and yeah,
man.
there are a lot more than I thought. Like there's Rip Loki, then there's his whole crown that he has, the scroll, there's
Yeah.
brothers tattooed on him, a broken heart, and then in the bottom in like a little banner it says rest in mischief.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh.
So Tara, what happens when our Loki, that's our surviving Loki from the 2012 New York survivor Loki, meets up with this Thor?
I don't know if I would like that.
Yeah,
Because
so
they're not, yes, it's his brother technically, but the Loki from Ragnarok, they have such a different history. So I don't know how I would feel about that. But I will say that when I saw it at the end credit scene, when Jane got to Valhalla, I was having like a heart attack because I was like, please don't be Loki, because I still believe that Loki will be back. Like Sacred Timeline Loki will be back. So I was like, please, please, please don't be Loki. And I like gasped out loud when it was Heimdall and like people stared at me. But yeah, I was like terrified.
So when we got the Loki series and we saw them at the end of the universe or at the end of time, and Loki obviously meets up with all the other Lokis, I feel like when Old Man Loki explained that he had cast the best illusion of his death to Thanos
Yes.
and survived, and the only reason why he was there was because he finally got lonely and wanted to go to his brother, that tells us that not only is it possible, but it probably happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
and so like, will we get to see him at some point? I really hope so. I know people are like, well, we just have to let these stories run their course and we need to not expect these characters back. No, not at all. We need them back.
See, I have a crazy theory about that. It would have to be another video. Because when I first realized that was the same Loki, like old Loki was Ragnarok Loki who had just like survived, I was a little mad because it just felt so like
In your face, like, oh wow, he could have done that.
yeah, well, it was just kind of like the same old Loki, and it just
Yeah.
it was, and so I didn't want to think that of Loki. But I definitely think it was them kind of telling us that there is a possibility that Loki is still out there somewhere. I just don't know why he won't come back.
Michael, in his discussion the other day, they were talking about when Jane and Thor first met, and they had the interaction about, oh, what's it been, 3-4 years? And we just thought it was like a joke, but Jane blipped, so she thinks that it's 3-4 years, but it's actually
Right.
8, however many years. So everyone thought, oh, it was just a joke, like, oh, it had people do that, but no, she actually blipped. So that makes complete sense as to why she would think that. That just, I didn't even think about that, honestly. I sometimes forget the blip existed. But yeah, that's crazy to think about, that she blipped and now here she is.
Now, I'm going to do a video on this, but did you guys realize that this movie actually gave an idea that Beta Ray build may already exist?
No.
I
So-
heard someone
So
say
think about this. Stormbreaker was just made in Infinity War, but Eternity's Key was Stormbreaker, and we know that when Eitri made it, he had made it off of a pattern that was already created. And so if that pattern had already existed, it means that they could have possibly have already built a Stormbreaker in the past. So what if the Stormbreaker that we know is not the first Stormbreaker in the MCU?
That would make sense, because Eitri did talk about, like, he specifically knew that he needed the Stormbreaker. Like it wasn't just something, like he knew, he had knowledge of it. So it's something that
He didn't have to design it. He like all he had were those
the mold
solid
things.
fists,
Yeah.
his fists, and he had the mold. So it would make perfect sense if at some time Thor had fought Beta Ray Bill, and Beta Ray Bill was able to pick up Mjolnir, and Odin, out of being impressed, had Stormbreaker designed for the specific purpose of giving it to Beta Ray Bill, giving him the ability to use the Bifrost, which then means that's why Thor knew he needed to go to Eitri and get Stormbreaker, because he needed something that would give him the abilities to transport, to fight, like give him those powers, harness his abilities. It makes perfect sense. I bet you there's another Stormbreaker out there now.
And there were just some foreshadowing things and different things that I saw too, like when they were talking, Korg and Valkyrie, they were talking on the ship about how Korg was like, oh, do you think they're going to have any babies? And Valkyrie was like, oh, unfortunately not. And then Korg was like, that's a shame. Thor would make such a great dad. And then, we go on to how this ends. And so that was just some foreshadowing there. And then with the kids, when Gore first comes to New Asgard, right as soon as he gets there, it pans over all the kids sleeping in their beds. And we just thought it was just a scene. But then later on, it turns out the same shadow monsters go and abduct the kids. So those foreshadowings were super cool to see that play in there. And then another thing that I noticed is in the trailer, they heavily played at like Gore talking to Thor during their fight, and he was like, you're not like the other gods I've killed, you have something worth fighting for. And I didn't hear that in there, like either of the times that I watched, because the second time I specifically was listening for that, because like that makes complete sense. He literally is fight, like none of the other gods would have went for their children, so it would have played in completely to the theme here that he abducted the kids because Thor cares enough to go and get them. So I was kind of, honestly, I was a little disappointed, because that would have been a cool line to hear from the God Butcher saying that to Thor. But yeah, those are just a couple of things that I noticed. Did anybody else notice anything that sticks out, or that anyone else may not have noticed?
A lot of people have been complaining about the scene at the end with the kids when he gives all of the kids the power.
That's my favorite scene.
I had to get off of Twitter because I was like, I can't listen to these people. Like, that was such a great moment.
I got goosebumps during that scene.
Me
Oh my
too.
god!
And November Rain playing in the background.
Yes.
Oh my gosh!
He gets his army.
Did you
It's his
also
people.
get they're all worthy, because he even says that if they be worthy and of a pure heart,
Mhm.
Yeah.
those
Yes.
kids were worthy to have the power of Thor
temporarily.
for a limited time
Temporarily,
only.
yes.
Time only.
And the meaning, he was the whole meaning behind it. How could you not love it? He was telling them, I don't care who you are, where you're from. Today, you're Asgardian. You are our people, and we're fighting for the same thing. That was just that was amazing. Everything about it.
It's the Into the Spider-Verse message that anybody can be Spider-Man, anybody can be Thor.
Mhm.
If you are worthy and have a pure heart, anybody can be. And then Jane goes and says, I'm the mighty Thor, and all these little Thors behind, like, we can all be Thor. I don't know. I love that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
did too.
Also,
I
do you
really
think
loved it.
Axel going to be part of the Young Avengers now?
I
I
feel
would
like he
love it.
almost has, like, he's going to be with,
Yeah.
because I think, do
He's a
the
big
Young
fan favorite,
Avengers come from
so-
all over the universe, or are they just from Earth?
I think Loki is one of the Kid Loki. I think.
So
is
yeah,
one of
he could help
Young
do the
Avengers.
Bifrost, get Kid Loki down to the.
Yep.
Yes, he has to. He was too prominent in this movie, and to
Mhm.
come out of literally nowhere and be such, like, a big
Right.
part, he has to be somewhere in the
I
future.
almost feel like Marvel wasn't expecting like Axel to be that big of a deal.
Mhm.
Because I almost think it's like there's sometimes like Alligator Loki. I don't believe that Marvel was ready for Alligator Loki to be like a big thing. And when everyone freaked out about Alligator Loki, that's why it took a while for like the Funko Pops and stuff to come out, because they weren't marketing for it.
Mhm.
I think they knew they had something with Grogu with the Mandalorian. Disney was ready for that, but I think even for that, it took a while for the merchandise to come out. because it was kind of like a bet. They didn't want to throw everything in there. But Axel is by far probably one of my favorite like up and coming that I didn't expect.
Mhm.
It's almost like this. I feel like we're at a point now where Marvel has all the source material, but they can do anything they want now. And they can build their own universe that doesn't always have to depend on the comics. And with Love, with Axel, seeing these characters. And I've been wanting to say this earlier, all of those shadow monsters, all of them were designed by the children of the staff and the crew and the crews of the movie.
Oh,
Taika
wow.
Waititi's kid was
Really?
looking over his
Oh,
shoulder and said, "What does the shadow monster look like?" And he goes, "I don't know. Why don't you tell me?" And so they drew a picture for him, and he took it to production, and they produced it. And so then they went to all of the crew kids and said, "Draw what you think a monster would look like." And they
Oh,
actually,
wow.
That's
all
so
of those monsters
cool.
were designed by the children of the crew.
And then a bunch of the cast kids were in it as well. So that's just so cool. The fact that how much of a part they had to do in this.
Yeah, and the kids did a great job at scary monsters.
Mhm.
And I would say, Tony, too, like, I mean, I know both you and I have little ones. I think you do too, Tara. Like, I don't know. Like, I think that there is something really powerful about a little kid seeing that scene, seeing that a kid could fight their nightmares and fight their monsters.
Mhm.
You know, would you, I'm just curious. So outside of the cursing, or even with the cursing, would you take, how old would you take a kid? Like, what do you think the minimum age is? Because I took my older daughter to all the Marvel movies. She's 12 now. And now I'm starting to feel like, I don't know, they're talking about orgies and this and that. And, there's a lot of cursing. And listen, I'm not prude or frigid, but I do think, it's definitely geared towards adolescence, but I also, it's kind of like comics too. It's like, when do you start introducing your child? Because I don't think it's as clear cut as it used to be. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I'm just curious as parents.
There were young kids in my theater. I mean, I went this morning, so,
Mhm.
but
Would
I
you
wasn't,
take your kids?
no, they wanted to go, but I didn't think they were ready.
I don't
Now that you've
take my
seen
son
it?
to theaters because he doesn't do well with theaters. Like, he's 7. So am I gonna like prevent him from watching this? Probably not, but there's for other reasons for that. But go ahead, Tara, what were you gonna say?
Oh no, yeah, my son is 4, so he would just be running around.
Mhm.
And my daughter is 6, but she, I just don't think that they would really know what was going on.
Mhm.
So
One creator on TikTok was talking about how they took his kid that was kind of close to my kid's age. And they turned and looked at him and said, is an orgy like a get together? And he's
I
like,
mean,
yeah, it is. Don't use it, but yes, don't say that, Hey, we're gonna have an orgy at my house,
Tony, to that question, right? Are the themes of Love and Thunder more important than the foul language and the whatnot? Or do you think that the themes of Love and Thunder, I found it really powerful. I found it really, especially seeing it the second time when, when Korg is saying, and they're known to their friends as Love and Thunder, and it hit me, and I thought there were some really powerful messages about, one of the things we also didn't talk about, and again, this might be a different conversation, Tony, maybe we'll do another one on the theology of Love and Thunder, but is the idea of free will, and ultimately that's what Thor counts on at the end, is free will, how is Gore going to use his free will? I'm going to use my free will to love. And our destinies are not written in stone, which I think is a theme of Loki too, that we can change our destinies and that we do have free will. And there's these really deep themes in phase 4. And these are themes that run through phase 4. Natasha's whole story that launched phase 4 is about free will, is about breaking predetermined patterns, about being your own person. can you be your own person? Shang-Chi is about that. Like,
Yep.
we're, so when Straw Hat Goofy or Soups criticizes Phase 4, I think that they're missing, and I'm curious if you guys agree or disagree, they're missing the threads, the thematic threads of Phase 4.
I feel like Juju, like he had a good premise with what he was talking about. I disagreed a little bit, and I explained my opinion of it. I'm not gonna really talk about like Soups and stuff because I don't want to get on that.
And I don't mean
yeah.
anything
No, I
disrespectful
don't
towards
think
Soups.
you do. I don't think
He's
you
a
do at
good
all.
guy.
He's a human being, and that we're gonna leave it at that. And so for me, I think the big thing is like there is something about this movie that is so important that regardless of like, let's say some of the things that you might have to field with your children, I think that there are some really great messages regardless of the theology and stuff. Because again, I said, like I said, fiction is fiction, and if your faith is challenged by fiction, then you need to rethink your faith. But Gore didn't lose. Thor didn't win. Like, this movie was about self-sacrifice. This was about dealing with trauma. This was about accepting who you are and that you can't prevent everything from happening. And I think the greatest message of Thor accepting his fate and deciding, instead of me trying to fight and to stop you, let me give you an alternative option so that you don't be just like the ones that you hate. And then I'm going to go spend time with that person that I love, because I was so afraid of losing them that I put them at arm's length. But now I would rather spend my last moments as we're both dying together than ever considering, hating on you any further. You've won, but do what you will with that choice. This is the first time we've actually had the villain win and then just do the right thing.
Right.
And that was extreme. Like, I think that the whole purpose was to break the Necrosword. And I think that Necrosword was influencing Gore, and it gave Thor the chance to compel him. If your anger is because of the loss of your love, bring love back. And that by itself is worth anything else that, as a parent, like with what, if I have to field the word orgy and explain that to my 7-year-old son, that's fine. Why are those two rock dudes making a baby? Because that's what two rock dudes do. They make babies in molten lava pools. What does it matter? But I want my son to understand the idea of self-sacrifice, that even if you've gone and done the wrong thing for so long, you can make it right. And that, if anything, even if you only have moments with your loved one, and this is where it kind of like speaks with me because of my son's condition and everything, spend that time you have with them, and don't try to change everything, accept and love what you can. And by far, I think that's the best part of this whole movie is that message, because it really compels me to want to do the best I can and just cherish what I have and realize I can't control everything.
That ultimately, at the end of the movie, Gore has unlimited power. Gore is omnipotent, is actually all powerful. He has all the power in the universe. And what would you do with all the power in the universe? Would you choose love?
Yeah.
And the movie says, hopefully, I hope you would, or at least, I think the movie in that way, Tony, I think the movie does challenge us, because I think it's saying most of us probably wouldn't, but we're going to give you a hopeful message of, when you have power, and we all do at different times, have all the power, that can we choose love over anger, over hate, over the shadows, if you will?